say that.
Welcome everyone to a wonderful webinar. We're waiting for all the people to sign in. My name is Fred Mayo. I'm the Interim Executive Director for Partnership and Outreach for ICRE. We're waiting for everyone to check in, and in a few minutes we're going to start. We have a wonderful panel of real experts, friendly, welcoming, and insightful, and a very talented monitor from Florida International University. Dr. Miranda Kittering-Lynch is also the Director of Membership for ICRE. So make sure you check in. We're going to start in a few minutes. And thank you for coming to a really important webinar. It's all about standing together, educating together, and supporting each other in these times of trial and tribulation where people are being mean and cruel and discriminatory against Asian Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders, both colleagues, students, and people in the industry. So thank you for joining us. We'll be with you in a few minutes. Hello and welcome to a wonderful panel on standing together, educating together. Whether you're in a morning session, a noon session, an evening session, or an opportunity to listen to this in a recorded version, on behalf of International CRE, the Council of Hotel, Restaurant, and Institutional Educators all over the world, my name is Fred Mayo. I welcome you to this wonderful webinar on standing together, educating together, and supporting each other. As the Executive Director for Outreach and Partnership for ICRE, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the number of panelists. I want you to know that we do this as a part of the commitment to education, to knowledge, to collaboration, and to sharing things with other people. So our hosting this webinar, and thank you for the support of Delaware County Community College, and for our president, Joy Dickerson, who is an assistant dean there, but the president of International CRE, an organization across the world. What we will do is I will introduce the panelists and the moderator, and then she will lead the panel through the discussion. At the end, we'll have plenty of time for question and answers. If you're motivated to ask a question before we start, I encourage you to put that note on chat, and I will make sure that the moderator and the panelists have a chance to respond to your questions. If there's no more time left to do that, we'll find a way to communicate that information to you after the fact of the situation. But I want to honor the spirit of hospitality, our commitment to knowledge, our commitment to collaboration, to participation, and to inclusion. And in that spirit, we have a wonderful group of speakers on the panel. Saisha Ann is an assistant professor and associate department chair in hospitality, recreation, and tourism at California State University, East Bay. You'll see a gorgeous background for her, where you can see the San Francisco Bay Area. She's been actively involved in CRE for years and really brings a lot of wisdom, experience, and mischievous and thoughtfulness to what she has to say. Dr. Michael Cheng, you will see with the three buttons on his collar, is the Dean of the Chapin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at Florida International, one of the largest programs in the country. And he's really brought it to a new level of commitment to education and to spreading the word and to connection with the community. He's made a real difference in where FIU goes. And he has brought his colleague, Dr. Miranda Kitterling Lynch, who will be the moderator for this conversation. Renisha Goodwin is the Senior Manager for Diversity, Education, Equity, and Inclusion at Hyatt, has been a strong member of CRE for years and has done a number of things from the industry point of view, making good on a commitment to really include people, treat people well, and change the culture of the hospitality and tourism industries. She also serves on the board of the Cheney University Hotel, Restaurant, and Tourism Program, and is a major figure in the National Society for Minorities in Hospitality. CC Lung is assistant professor in the Department of Hospitality and Tourism at the University of North Texas, a very large, very powerful, and very important program in the southern part of this country. And you'll notice that we bring people from all over the United States for this kind of conversation. It's part of what we mean by standing together and educating together. Robert Lee is the professor of and chairman of the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management at Temple. You'll recognize him with his red background showing the city of Philadelphia. He also is the chair of the U.S. Asia Center for Tourism and Hospitality Research at Temple, which is a leading institution in an urban kind of setting, very different. And the last speaker is Simi Myers, the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Delaware County Community College. Thoughtful, insightful, a twinkle in her eye, and she brings a different perspective because she's not teaching hospitality management or leading in hospitality management. And so I think you'll enjoy hearing what she has to say as well. So let me introduce the associate professor in the Chapin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at Florida International, our very talented and our very thoughtful and smart moderator, Dr. Miranda Kitterling Lynch. The field is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for being here. Today's session will provide us a time to reflect on the recent tragic events and their impacts targeting our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. Across the United States, we've seen nearly 4,000 reported anti-Asian racist incidents in just the past year, with women reporting twice as many incidents as men. Perhaps less acknowledged are the many microaggressions and bullying incidents that our colleagues, friends, and students may be experiencing. Our international CRE community is one cohesive, multicultural, and diverse community, and we stand together and we support one another. Today's webinar will give us an opportunity to gain heightened awareness of this very important topic. We will also discuss ways we can support and empower our Asian American and Pacific Islander community in not just our organization, but in our classrooms and our industry. The first question I'd like to submit to our panelists is, I'd like for you to help us understand the scope of the situation by providing some specific occurrences or statistics of AAPI hate or violence that have occurred in this past year. Michael, if you want to begin.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Miranda. And also want to thank Joy and Fred again for organizing this webinar. As Miranda said, this is very timely. And, honestly, I've lived here in the US for 30 years. I was born and raised in Malaysia, came as an international student. And when all these anti-Asian hate crimes started showing up in the news media, on my Instagram feed, on TV, I really wasn't sure what to do. There was confusion in here because yeah, I was confused. It's like, what is going on here? And then I started reading the statistics. And for me, I remember the day the tipping point happened for me is when I watched on the news an elderly woman in San Francisco who got attacked by looks like a white male, and she was saying something in Cantonese. It wasn't pleasant, and but at the same time too, she was crying. And that hit home to me because in the Asian culture, honestly, or in any culture, you shouldn't be attacking your elders. It's just you respect your elders. So that was at that point I decided I have got to do something. And I think I made my first post that day on Instagram about it. So it's just it, and then you start reading more and more about it and you go, wow, the victims, like it shows on the chart here, 68% of the AAPI victims are female. And we see the stuff in the news that's violent, but what about all the microaggressions? What about all the racial slurs that happen, the looks, all those stuff that's like, who's addressing that? So I really do appreciate us organizing this and allowing us, giving us a chance to share our feelings and thoughts on this.
Thank you for being open when sharing that. Robert, would you like to take it next?
Well, I would like to echo what Michael just said. And once again, I want to thank I-CRE and Joy for your leadership to and coordinate this. I think this is a very timely and important topic. Miranda, if you don't mind to change to slide 4, and I want to show you one statistics that actually was just released. A research team, my colleagues at Temple University's U.S. Asia Center for Tourism Hospitality Research, we have been conducting a series of surveys on American leisure travelers on their COVID, during and after COVID tourism and hospitality related behavior. So in a recent survey earlier this month, actually, we asked a booster sample of AAPI respondents. We asked them whether they are aware of the recent surge of the violence and hate crimes against the community, and 96.7% of the AAPI respondents are aware of that. And then we ask those who are aware if this will negatively affect their willingness to travel domestically. Because we're tourism researchers, we want to speak by the numbers and we want to understand the scale of this recent surge on its impact on the AAPI community, particularly from a tourism hospitality perspective. And over 50%, 52.7% of them said that these hate crimes, this surge, actually will negatively affect their willingness to travel. And then if I may just add another thing, that we also ask, if you indeed actually going to travel on a leisure vacation, are you going to be concerned about a series of factors? Particularly among them, there is one thing about receiving unfriendly or even hostile comments from strangers. And 44% of AAPI respondents said that they would be concerned. And when you compare that to the non-AAPI members, that level is only 24%. In other words, AAPI respondents have a 20% higher percentage of AAPI respondents are more concerned about the recent crime. And this fact is pretty alarming. Thank you.
I want to add on to what Robert just said too about the travel piece. So you see a lot of these hate crimes happen on the East Coast, West Coast, and it does concern me. New York City is one of my favorite cities to visit, and I am concerned as an Asian American visiting New York City today. It's just I'm not sure what's going to happen. And that kind of stuff worries. And then what happened in Atlanta when the guy went around and shot a bunch of massage parlors, that was a little too close to home for me. It's weird because South Florida is very diverse. Miami is incredibly diverse, and I've never felt like I was in harm's way here in Miami. And I think we have this kind of crazy magical bubble that protects us from COVID as well. But Asian Americans, I think it's because we're so small, such a small population, and it's so diverse that it didn't feel unsafe until it got to Atlanta. And I was like, okay, that's less than 10 hours drive away. Now that's a little worrisome.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Michael. Cece, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, so it was on the last page. Sorry, we're flipping back and forth. So as we know, because of the surge of the hate crimes against the AAPI community has been really fueled by the coronavirus pandemic. There's a statistic, the column chart shows here that since last March, more than 40% of the AAPI hate incidents have been targeted at Chinese. And the second ethnic group was Korean, which was 14%, so there's no way close. So as a Chinese myself, it's a little worried that I'm a little worried about traveling to big cities, just as Michael.
Thank you, Cece. And Seha, did you want to add anything before we move to the next item?
Yeah, let me add one thing. Timely topic. Thank you so much for organizing. Yesterday, it just happened to me. I just want to share what happened to me yesterday. I went out with my husband to get a frozen custard. We're just walking, very happy. Big white truck was just passing right next to us and they're saying, "Go inside." What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to, what inside? I just want to get my frozen custard. Maybe they didn't mean anything about anti-Asian violence, but the fact that they scream at us in the middle of the really big road, we were really scared. We run to this frozen custard store, we bought it, and then we just came back home. We try to find a shortcut. Wow, this is a real thing. It's happening in this country. Before, I was reading things in the newspaper and I was watching TV and I felt that that's really heartbreaking. But the one thing, I was not hit by anybody, but one sentence, "Go inside." That was really scary. And here, I'm very happy that I have a chance to share my own story and experiences here with you guys. And I think that's what I can add here, Miranda. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. So what I'd like to ask next, from phrases such as perpetual foreigners and bamboo ceiling to the most recent anti-Asian violence, what do you see as the key challenges facing our AAPI colleagues? And maybe, Seha, you could jump right back in with that?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Before I actually go into any details, I just want to make sure one thing, that all of my answers for the questions or opinion that I'm going to share is going to be totally my personal experience as a Korean woman, also Asian woman faculty, but they might not necessarily representing the whole AAPI community or college or their experience. So key challenges that we have is, I believe, the cultural misunderstanding. Since we're young, excuse me, we're taught the values of being respectful, self-effacing, reticent, and differential towards authority. But those values were not really well translating into translate well into American workplace, where Koreans are usually seen as arrogant or inattentive. But from my experience, Koreans are seen as more likely to be too humble, no confident, obedient, but also no communication skills. One ridiculous story from grad school that I have is, one faculty member always said that Korean male students are all yes men because they never say no to faculty. And then they let the Korean male students clean their room, empty trash can, buy coffee and sandwiches, and deliver them to their office. And those are not TA's or RA's responsibilities. And I'm sure that it was obvious that the faculty member take advantage of the Korean male students' willingness to be differential towards authority and also their respectful nature. Asian Americans are usually less likely to aggressively network or self-promote or speak up at work compared to their coworkers. So as a result, they are less likely to be seen as having qualities that appeals to American employers, such as charisma, leadership, risk-taking, or creativity. So they're often passed over for promotions, even though their job performance is satisfactory. So there is a representation in the lower level positions, but there is an underrepresentation in the upper level management position or executive positions. So I do believe that lack of having role models in upper level positions and executive positions is another key challenges we have at work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If I may add on to that, what Saya just mentioned, it's the whole perception that we're model minorities. It's like, okay, so what defines model minority and why are Asians defined as model minorities? Like, would you expect me to behave a certain way, not speak up, just sit down? It's like, you know, who made that rule, right? So those kind of things, you know, when you start questioning, nobody really has an answer. So I'm not sure where it came from. My own challenges still exist to this day. In my current role, I've been the permanent dean here for a little over a year, interim for 2 years. You'll be amazed how many times I go out and I meet with public people and I introduce myself, and they don't catch the fact that I say, "Hi, I'm the dean, Michael Cheng." They don't catch it when I say it the first time. And then usually it's somebody else with me, usually it's my development officer, who then repeats it. And then the look I get is like, "Oh, you don't look like a dean." Like, what am I supposed to look like? What is the dean supposed to look like? You know, is it an age thing? Or is it a, I don't know, gender thing? Is it a race thing? What is it? So it's those kind of things. It's just sometimes, yeah, sometimes I ask them, depending on the situation and depending on who's around and who I'm talking to, I'll ask, so what does the dean look like? You know, most often I don't get an answer to that one because I think they know.
If I may chime in here, I absolutely agree with my colleagues, and I would like to say the anti-Asian sentiment is actually not new. What seems to be lacking, or what seems to be kind of a distinctive of this whole issue, is the lack of visibility, lack of discussion like this, like what we're doing today, is that the people's awareness of, you know, discrimination against AAPI members, AAPI poverty, for example, talking about model citizens, they think that somehow, you know, we are all rich, crazy rich Asians. No, not necessarily true. And the anti-Asian violence, somehow it didn't get to the level of the media or public attention as some other social issues. And also another challenge that I would like to add is something that I have been inspired by historians, is that for a country of immigrations like United States, any foreign affairs will be somehow intertwined and translated into domestic issues. In other words, if there's tension between US and China, a dispute between US and India, all these things will be somehow reflected on our life here in the US, even though we have no control whatsoever. And so that actually makes things much worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And touching upon one thing you said, that this is not new, why do you think that we are seeing, and this doesn't have to be you just answering, this is open to all the panelists, why do you think that we're seeing such an increase over the past year in this Asian hate in the United States?
Well, if other, again, you know, we're being so polite and respectful to each other, very Asian here. I think this, the current environment certainly make things worse, but it starts, the roots goes with the very fundamental fact that number matter. In other words, the AAPI population, right now we are 23 million strong, but still it counts about 5 to 6% of the population. In other words, when we are talking about political calculation, public polling and other things, we're considered statistically insignificant. So in that case, there are lots of issues that have been overlooked and continue being overlooked. And of course, the current pandemic, when people are linking the origin of the pandemic with ethnic background and other things, that make things worse. And of course, the other aspect of this source of the issue is, as Michael just mentioned, some of the values that we have seems to be not necessarily working well in the American workplace. That, I can quote my dear colleague, Dr. Bing Pan at Penn State University, that the things like respect for authority, things like humbleness, self-efficacy, those things can be translated into lack of leadership potential, lack of confidence and competence, and then to go to its extreme, then we are more vulnerable or easy to be bullied. And so somehow this, when you combine that with the way we look, and in some cases the way we speak, somehow Asian Americans are considered not American enough for whatever mean. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to add to what Robert has said?
Yeah, I will. I think that when we're looking at things historically, whenever we see some kind of major event or some kind of disaster, something like a pandemic, kind of wherever you are, and we definitely see this in the United States, that the population really looks for someone to blame, right? Where did it come from? And how can we think about our daily lives in order to avoid contact, right? Who do we blame for this? And I think, unfortunately, what we're seeing because of the origins of the pandemic, then of course, that's why we see a higher incidence rate of people who are being targeted who are Chinese, right? But we know that typically if people are going to be racist, they're not going to make sure they're looking at the right ethnic group. So you're going to get everyone in there. But I think what's important to realize, like when we're saying this is not new, is that the stereotypes, the hate that comes out is based on things that were kind of already simmering or already in existence, but then they're kind of reborn when there's one group that we're focusing on, right? And so I think when we're looking at the origins, when we didn't really know a lot about COVID-19, right? Thinking about our early conversations where we're looking at, okay, we're thinking it came out of a marketplace. So then people start to think about associations with food. What do Chinese Americans eat, right? And then we're seeing that decrease in people willing to go to Asian restaurants, thinking that, oh, if you go there, you must be more likely to get COVID-19. And we know that's absolutely not true. And so again, it's because we have these existing stereotypes, these existing associations that have always been things that Asian Americans have struggled with. That then when we have some event that happens, then it just gets magnified. And I think that's where we're seeing these patterns that people have always dealt with, but now they're on a larger scale. Now they're on a national scale. And that's where we're, again, seeing these things that aren't new, these patterns that aren't new.
I think also there was a boldness and a lack of condemnation when it came to referring to COVID-19 as the China virus or any of these derogatory terms. And as a result, because it was said so often in the media and said so often by the previous administration of the United States, it almost made it seem acceptable. And the minute it was said, it should have been designated as something that was untrue, not factual, and harmful. And now, as a result, people are being physically harmed and fearing for their lives because not enough of us stood up and said, that's not okay, when it was being said many, many months ago.
Thank you so much. You ladies make excellent points. I'd like to move us, if I can, towards the topic of what can the AAPI community allies do to best advocate for and support our AAPI colleagues? And that can be for anyone.
I think forums or webinars like this as a place to share. There are real people behind us. We're not a mysterious race. And Asians tend to get grouped into one homogeneous pool of Asians. It's not. It's like how many different countries do we have represented here, right? But not everybody understands that, and they just kind of assume we're all Chinese. That's not true. So I think helping others understand our different cultural backgrounds or different cultural practices would definitely help the conversation in creating allies.
I think I can add on top of what Michael just said. Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. Right after I received the panel invitation email from Joy, our awesome ICRE president, I was really thrilled. Because the fact that ICRE cares about the AAPI colleagues and community. And also the fact that ICRE is planning for this timely and essential topic panel sessions, I already felt that I am valued. So these kinds of I think regular is important. Regularly, maybe having webinars, educational sessions, or panels will be really helpful to support the community, but also increase the visibility of the AAPI community. I think the goal is to provide a professional, but also a safe place for the AAPI colleagues. In the same line with that, I think ICRE can provide places for a mentor and mentee program. I think it can go back to my answer, so lack of having a good mentors or role models in the upper level position. So not necessarily everybody has a good mentor in their department or college or at the workplace. And it was really hard for me to find out one good mentor when I really need help as a Korean, Asian woman faculty. So maybe as a safe and professional place, maybe at the annual CRE conference, if ICRE can offer a mentor and mentee program, I think that would be really awesome to support the AAPI community. Thank you.
I also believe that as allies, we have to acknowledge that there is not a scarcity of empathy. Sometimes there feels like there isn't enough empathy, but we have the capacity to care about Black Lives Matter. We have the capacity to care about anti-Asian hate. We have the capacity to care about gun violence in the United States. We can take this on through education and supporting each other and recognizing that solving for one will benefit all. And sometimes we think that only one priority at a time, right? But in the same way that my family and I sat around and we talked about police overreach, my family and I sat around and we talked about our Asian neighbors and how they could be feeling, and recognizing that there were commonalities in the fact that we were fearful for different reasons when it came to going outside, but we all could relate to that feeling of fear and that feeling of needing to be supported. And so that's what I would encourage allies to do, is recognize that we have the capacity to show empathy. There isn't a shortage of empathy.
Yeah, and go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was going to say, I will also add speaking up for others. When you see racism happening, when you see hate crimes happening, step in and speak up and help them. Because, like what Robert had mentioned earlier, we're usually quiet. Not all of us are talkative like this. And we'll be like, we'll just take it, kind of thing. But that's not right. That doesn't mean it's acceptable or correct. So allies, it would really help with other Asian Americans when AAPI community, when their allies speak up for them.
I would like to just, please, Simi, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add to really what Ronisha was saying. I feel like people are doing a lot of looking at history, especially when thinking about support of things like Black Lives Matter, right? And not understanding that there are a lot of parallels when you're looking at Asian American history in the United States. You can look at things like the Chinese Exclusion Act. You can look at the killing of Vincent Chin. And you can look at the involvement of Asian Americans in the establishment of the Black Panther movement, for example. And I think that when we are able to tell these kinds of stories and look at these histories and see that, that people were experiencing, again, different things, but we're having similar struggles at the same time, that can not only really help us to understand today, but also understand how we can kind of come together and support each other. I think knowing that history is important for not just disregarding people as, say, the model minority, or saying everyone, in this group is fine, but rather looking at that very, unfortunately, rich history of discrimination and saying, okay, what does that look like today? And then how can we support our Asian American communities?
Yeah. Well, I very much like what I heard from all colleagues, and I would, since I'm a number guy, I would like to add 2 numbers here, and they are for 2 different audience. The first one is to nerds and like me, who are more research minded, who think that our research is beyond all these social issues. A recent paper, 2021 paper published by Dr. Bing Pan and his collaborators, they found, they actually did an experiment to try to use different names to solicit online survey response. And they found that solicitation emails with a Caucasian colleague's Western name generated 63% higher response rate than the same email, everything else is the same, but with a Chinese sounding name. So even if you think like, I'm just going to focus on research, I have nothing to do with all these social, racial issues, this is an alarming factor that we have to face. The second one is actually, I think all of us, AAPI supporters and AAPI colleagues, all need to think about that. I would like to quote Ranu Khatter, who is president of University of Houston. She wrote a 2010 piece on the bamboo sailing issue. And I quote here that although nearly 7% of tenured faculty members in American universities are Asian Americans, less than 1% of presidents or chancellors come from this group. So for AAPI supporters and for AAPI colleagues, I think this is something that we need to be aware of. Basically, I think we need more Michael Chen. Thank you.
No, you don't.
Thank you, everyone. On that same note of higher ed, what can we do in higher ed specifically to support our AAPI colleagues and students in the classroom, on campus, with university policies and procedures?
I think reaching out, when I woke up, I was like, I bet I'm not the only one feeling this way, so started to reach out to my colleagues and reach out to my students. And then one of our industry partners also reached out to me, and I was like, wow, having a conversation with him suddenly lifted the weight off of my chest. Being able to talk to another Asian about the same experiences, and both of us are confused, like what's going on? How do we deal with this? And now we have a WhatsApp group, and we want to talk more about it with other people and see if we can do something. And it comes back to the whole education and creating allies and really generating awareness. So if we don't do that, so that's why this forum is very timely. Now, if we don't do that, nobody knows, and it just all kind of stays quiet.
I want to mention, come back to, because we are a hospitality group, and our students really need to know other cultures. So globalization is a key trend in the hospitality and tourism industry. And very recently, just last year, our college at University of North Texas received a grant from U.S. Department of Education for us to internationalize our curriculum to provide our students with a fully internationalized education experience. And Asian culture is one of the focus in this process. So as a faculty in my class, I really want students to know how today's Asian country look like, because maybe as a stereotype, they always think Asian as an old Asian way. So in my class, for example, when I'm teaching the topic of mobile technology in hospitality, I show my students with a video talking about how popular the mobile payment is used in China, that people no longer need their wallet. And in other class, like I showed a Chinese Marriott hotel letting guests check in using their facial recognition, and a restaurant allowing guests to use facial recognition to make payments. So I think this is very important for us to show the students, because most of them have never been to the Asian countries, and they would never know how the Asian country look like if we don't show them in our class. And another thing in my class is I always encourage the Asian students. I do have some Asian students in class to, when they do the group project, I want them to group with students of other ethnicities. So, you know, Asian students always want to group within their ethnicity. They want to group with Asian students. So I make it as a requirement of the project that all the student group have to have members of different ethnicities, so they can talk to other students of other ethnicity, and they can exchange their cultures after class.
If I may add one more thing, I agree with Sissy actually. So what I have some doable actions in the class. So try to honor other different cultures. So when I teach the lodging management class, I let international students talk about their own lodging style first. Like Japanese students can talk about ryokan, which is a Japanese traditional style lodging. And I talk about hanok, which is Korean's traditional style housing. And then I switch the topic to Western culture. So people psychologically think that the first comment is more important, right? But I kind of switch the focus a little bit and talk about intercultural, like other cultures stuff, history first, and then talk about Western culture. And I think these small changes and tactics really works very well to support intercultural awareness and then the information. And second thing that I do in my classes, try to make a very welcoming and friendly syllabus by using positive words. I mean, we all know that the syllabus is a kind of contract between professors and students. So always add the welcome statement that includes the importance of respecting each other's and how I welcome all the differences. I mean, open one's mind, let's accept each other as it is. All those statements, adding that small changes, I'm pretty sure that can make a big impact on our student learning experience. And also that way we can support the intercultural knowledge and information happens in our classes. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some great ideas for inside the classroom. Can we switch now to industry? I'd love to hear from Simi and Ronisha on their ideas with regards to what do you think the industry stance is on this issue?
So I'm more in the higher ed realm, so I'll do just a kind of brief overview for higher ed and then pass it on to Ronisha. So I think when we're thinking really beyond the classroom and we're thinking more globally in higher ed, that we have to make sure that we're not just considering the support that Asians need when we're just thinking about, say, ESL, for example, because I think that's what tends to happen, that when we are thinking about the supports that all of our students need, because Asians tend to be higher achieving than other students, then instructors just assume that they don't need support, they don't need help, unless we're talking about ESL courses, right? And I think that that perpetuates stereotypes. I think that that really limits the conversations that we can have with students or how we think about students in our classrooms. And so I think what we have to make sure that we're doing, because I think for the most part, when we have things like discrimination policies, we've had these for a long time, and these tend to be pretty well established. But I think how we actually interpret them and how we actually carry them out is when there's kind of those room for treating people a little bit differently, depending on who we're talking to. And I think we have to make sure that when it comes to our Asian American students in general and our Asian American colleagues, that we're not just assuming that, you know, they're all right, that everyone's doing okay, everyone is supported, that we're thinking more about events that people have brought up that are specifically targeting Asian Americans, that have conversations about their experiences, what they look like, how they're different, and also empower this group of students and colleagues. I think we don't do that enough, and that we have to think more about doing that holistically as opposed to assuming what we think this group needs, where we really want to think about, again, each group more as needing a little bit of everything, as opposed to just some specific resources that we're assuming are their needs.
From an industry perspective, the issue is so complex, and the issue is complex for a couple of reasons. Typically, we don't bring race into the workplace. And so even though we have discussions about diversity, it's another level of vulnerability to say, I am a Black female, and this is how current events directly impact me and my family, my life. So when we're thinking about our colleagues who are members of the AAPI community, it's truly about creating the safe space so that they feel comfortable to share. Unfortunately, the pandemic has done two things. The first is that it's caused additional stressors to all of us. And then it's also caused us to be physically distant from one another. So we're not only missing the support of the family that we were born into, we're also missing the support of the family that we choose, right? And so for me, that's my Hyatt family. And so not being able to be there every day and see faces and give hugs and inquire, it's really caused us to say, we really have to lean into this. And part of leaning into it is awareness. And so for us, that awareness has started from our CEO raising awareness around businesses that are owned by Asian Americans, also our Asian suppliers, because it's so important that as the hospitality industry rebuilds, we also have to help our small businesses rebuild. The second is making sure that it's known that this is an issue that concerns everyone. And so that's messaging from senior leaders, our group presidents, executive sponsors of diversity business resource groups. And then the third is making sure it trickles down so that, Michael, if you and I are on a friendly relationship, I'm more willing to open it up to you and give you a call and say, hey, how are you feeling? How's your family doing, right? And so we have to encourage our colleagues to reach out to each other. When I think about the industry rebounding, I don't know about you, but I can't wait to travel again. And so as vaccines have become more readily available and traveler confidence is boosting, the last thing we need is for individuals to have fear to come to the United States, fear to travel. And so I was reading an article Skift did about a study of mainland Chinese travelers. And one of the top factors in them deciding to travel was friendliness towards Chinese travelers. And so it's so important to us as members of the industry, members of hospitality, that we have to care about the issue because it affects so many aspects of not even just the business, but so many aspects of the people that we love.
It's very well put. Thank you so much. We do have some time left for a couple of questions from the audience. Fred, would you like to read off some of the questions that we have? And while Fred's doing that, if our panelists want to also include any resources for the audience, feel free to share those in the chat before our session is over.
Panelists, you got a lot of praise. Several people said wonderful comments, great ideas. We need to share this more widely. I answered on your behalf that we will, and Cree will be promoting that, etc. But one of the participants said, do your programs offer study abroad opportunities to introduce our students to other cultures? Would any of you like to speak to that question?
So at FIU, we have a campus in China, in Tianjin, China. We've been there for 16 years. And it's a great opportunity for our students in the US to spend a semester living and learning in China with our Chinese students. And you would think that I have dozens of students dying to go over there. No, if we get 12 in one semester, it's a great semester. You know, we usually get between 7 to 8, sometimes 9, but never more than 12. And I think the hesitation, and this is also me on a personal level, right? The hesitation is the not understanding China. So when I took on this role and I was told, okay, we got a campus in China, you got to go to China like 3 times a semester. I'm like, no, that's like the last thing on my bucket list to want to go to. And when I first went there into Beijing, I was astounded. I'm like, wow, this is not China that I was imagining in my crazy head. This is incredible. Now I love going to China. I hate the flight, but I love going to China. So it's just, and we get the same kind of reaction from our students too. You know, trepidation, fearful, not sure what we're gonna walk into over there, but they have such a great experience and they come back incredibly like enlightened. I don't know what the right word is, but they love it.
So Michael, that suggests an approach that we all should think about overcoming Chinophobia.
Yeah, exactly. So
Robert, at Temple, do you have a study abroad program?
If I may chime in, surely we do, and also we partner with many different international universities. I want to actually share a great news just happened last week that we got one new class approved from my department, Tourism Hospitality Department, for a Gen Ed class, meaning that is offered to different disciplines, undergraduate students across different disciplines. It's focusing on cultural intelligence. So in other words, I think in addition to study abroad or those kind of immersive cultural experiences classes, we also need to teach our students who may or may not be able to engage in study abroad physically, but to teach them cultural intelligence, because this is too important an issue for us to prepare future leaders of our industry. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an important question. Other questions? We had one more question here. Was the issue of will this be downloaded and will this be shared? And the answer is yes, it will be. But there was another question about the issue of, hold on, I'm just finding the issue. As students, what can we do to make a change in our institutions and in our world? Panelists, what would you say to students and how they can make changes? Saya, you have that very thoughtful.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure that this is one of my students, because I told them, if you come to the panel, you're going to get the extra credit. So I know the students. Thank you. Yeah. So thanks, Andrea. Thanks for your question. And I feel like, wow, what a great question from our students. They're actually thinking that, oh, I can make some changes for this anti-Asian violence, right? Or I want to do something. I really like that energy level. I guess as a formal international student who studied here in this country, my colleagues, American colleagues, have been really patient with me. My English, when I just came, was not like this. I couldn't speak well. When I'm in that group with them, they're really patient, try to listen to me, and then see why I think differently than them when we talk about one topic. So I think students can be maybe a little bit more patient to each other, try to see each other's differences and understand each other. And in the meantime, I mean, during that, everyone will learn from each other. So I see that that is a real moment that the real learning is happening from my previous experience. So students can be really patient to each other and try to learn from each other.
So here's an added question that just came up. Do you think campus awareness meetings on these issues will help? Any one of you?
I think campus awareness meetings will definitely help. When students ask what can they do, a simple thing that they can do is monitor the conversations around them. And if people are saying things that are harmful to other ethnic groups, people of color, women, etc., you have to say something about it. One of the links that I put in the chat is a great share on bystander intervention and how to essentially be an ally. And sometimes being an ally is inserting yourself into a situation. And so that tool shows you how to do it safely.
Thank you. That's a great point, Renisha. One other question that came up is the issue of a concern that all AAIP groups are one lump, when there's a very big difference between Korea, Japanese, Malaysia, the Philippines. Asia is a huge geographic area, and there's many multiple ethnic groups. Would anyone like to speak to that question?
I certainly agree that more education is needed instead of lumping it all together. I mean, for the purpose of census, I'm not sure what the answer is to that one. But we look at our own Vice President Kamala Harris and her ethnic background, and then people go, well, hold on a second, she's African American. I say, hold on a second, no, she's Asian American as well. And where's the Asian part of it? And it's like, India, what do you mean? So it's those kind of things, and to share with you my own story too. Just the other night, so my wife's Caucasian. Just the other night, I was talking to her. I'm not sure how it came up. And I say, yeah, I'm of color. And she looks at me. We've been married for 23 years. We've been together for 28 years. She goes, you're not of color. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm of color. I'm not white. So my own wife. But her family accepts me. One of the most embracing white families ever to accept me. When I came here, 30 years ago, really. But it's just those kind of little education, right?
If I may chime in.
Go ahead, Robert, and then there's the last question from.
Actually, going back to and then also reflecting on this question, I think we have to remind students to communicate and then also understand and appreciate the universality of humanity. Even though we're different in so many different ways, there is something fundamental that we share in common. Good, kindness, and a lot of other great things. Actually, I just want to remind everybody, if you haven't seen this is Chloe Zhao, who just won the Oscar's Best Director Award. And she said in her speech, which is a really touching point, she said, if I quote, that she learned at the very young age something very fundamental for her. The first phrase from the 3 character classics, that people at birth are inherently good, regardless of color or many other things. And she said that, and I still truly believe this to them today, even though sometimes it might seem like the opposite is true. But I have always found goodness in the people I met everywhere I went in the world. So this is for anyone who has faith and courage to hold on to the goodness in themselves and to hold on to the goodness in each other, no matter how difficult it is. So I want to tell the students that still try to appreciate the humanity and kindness of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We have run out of time, unfortunately. This has been such a fantastic conversation. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. Thank you to all of our panelists. I'd just like to end us with our ICRE motto. ICRE is a global and multicultural community, and we are committed to all of our members and future leaders. And again, to our audience, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.